I'm curious to know what the faces of the juries were. They stoic? Were they? Did they look at anyone?
To be honest, Emily, I was looking directly at Richard Allen, and I was trying to look at the families. We should mention a sentencing date has been set, so December 20th is when Richard Allen will be sentenced, and during the sentencing portion of the verdicts being read today, this was after the verdicts were read, but at that point, Richard Allen turned around. It was the first emotion that we saw. He looked at his wife, Kathy, and he said, "Are you okay?" Kathy was crying. Richard Allen's mother was in court. She was crying. Again, as things started to clear out, Jerry Holman, Indiana State Police detective, who has been on this case for multiple years, he went over and he hugged the defense team and he kissed Nick McLeland, the prosecutor. There were a lot of hugs on the side of the prosecution. Again, after the families were starting to leave, we were asked to stay in the courtroom to give the families a chance to file out. The families went up to the prosecution team, shook hands, hugged as well. So a lot of emotion. Again, everyone kind of kept things in check while the jury was in there, while the judge was in there afterward. That's when we saw the emotion really starting to let out.
This is the day, Emily, and
Today
we've
is
heard
the
the family say this is the day many, many times,
Yeah.
but now finally this is the day for justice for the families of Libby and Abby.
Yeah, I can hear them saying it. Today is the day. They would say it so many times over the years, and to be here in this moment, I have goosebumps considering it and thinking today is the day for them. Today is the day for Abby and Libby and their families, the people that love them.
There's no doubt that this legally was, in many ways, if you looked at outside observers, says there's just a circus going on there. I mean, there was just no love lost between the defense and the prosecution and the judge in this case. Often after we hear a verdict, then we hear, well, there will be an appeal. Any word, any talk about that? Walk us through those steps as we count down to sentencing, where at last report I had read that Richard Allen could get up to 130 years in prison if convicted of all the charges. Is that consistent with what you've been finding?
Well, if I remember correctly, I think it's 46 years on the main counts, and whether those are going to be concurrent, whether those are going to be consecutive, there will be a pre-sentence report that will be filed that the judge will consider at the sentencing hearing. The judge will hear from both the prosecutor and from the defense to try to mitigate as far as either how lengthy or how short the sentence will be. So again, the judge is the one who's going to decide what the sentence is going to be. And to your point regarding an appeal, we pretty much, that's almost a certainty. There was certainly a lot of evidence that the defense wanted to enter into this case that they were not allowed to, that Judge Gall told them that she did not think that they had enough of a link between some of the things that they wanted to bring in and the actual crime. So the defense most certainly will be filing an appeal in this case, that it will go to the Indiana Court of Appeals.
And Bob, would they file that after he is sentenced?
It's a good question. I don't know that. I'll be interested to hear that from Katie Jackson-Lindsay as far as the timing of how all that plays out. But I believe it probably would take place after the sentence.
Because listen, there was a handful of people that this defense team believed in their alternate theory was responsible in this crime, and they wanted to be able to talk about that to the jury. Again, as you said, Judge Gall ruled no, that's not going to happen, that would confuse the jury, and we're going to stick with these set of facts right here, and that's what they did.
Richard Allen was arrested and has been in custody since October of 2022, so 2 years served. Part of the testimony in this case is that was a very difficult time, especially when he was in solitary confinement. Having a mental breakdown was part of the argument, even part of the testimony that we're trying to determine whether or not he had developed some sort of psychosis. So that's another thing that will be taken into consideration in the sentencing as well for those 2 years since he's been here in custody, state custody, since 2022.
Yeah, all those things will be a factor, and there are multiple items that the defense will want to bring up on appeal, whether they were allowed to enter certain things that the judge did not allow them to, witnesses that they wanted to bring, evidence that they wanted to show the jury that they were not able to. So, and even the procedural moves that happened long ago, dating back here over the last year in this case, things that Judge Gall ruled on, those will all be brought up, and all of those things were preserved on the record by the defense team so that when this case does go to the Court of Appeals, those will be considered. But again, today, guilty. That is the verdict. That is, these 12 jurors who spent the last nearly month of their lives looking at all the evidence, looking at all the testimony. Decisive decision from these jurors today. They say Richard Allen is guilty of killing Abby Williams and Libby German.
And we have not been able to talk with that panel, and that we may never hear from them, or we may. I mean, it depends if they want to talk about what those deliberations were like, what were key points of evidence, was it the confession, was it the cartridge, what was it that led them to have this unanimous decision beyond a reasonable doubt.
I mean, when you think about those confessions, Bob, that we heard, him, at least the ones that they played in court, in those confessions, I mean, he sounded fairly logical, no?
He did. The one confession that stands out in my mind the most was on a call to his mother, Janice, and he said, did Kathy, my wife, tell you that I confessed? And she said, yeah, we're not going to talk about that. You didn't do it. They're messing with your mind. He said, no, I did it. And she said, no, honey, I can't. I know you don't have it in you to do something like that. And his response was, Mom, I wouldn't sit here and tell you I did it if I didn't do it. And that really stood out to me. So ultimately then it comes down for the jurors to figure out, do they believe the state's witnesses that he was, thinking clearly at that time, or that he was in a state of psychosis? These jurors believed at this point, they believed the prosecutor. They believed the state saying Richard Allen was in his right mind when he made those statements. And, a lot of times you hear when someone says something, believe them. And in this situation, the jury believed Richard Allen when he said, I killed Abby and Libby.